Welcome to Belfast Skeptics in the pub. Hands up who's actually been to a Skeptics event before? 1, 2. Well, basically, just to explain a bit about Belfast Skeptics. Hello, that's it. Just to explain a bit about us, we've been going since, was it 2010? Around 2010. And initially there was quite a flurry of activity. We're having speakers every month. And it was all organised by Connor and Alana and Phil mainly, who have all now moved to Dublin. Yeah, we've tried to keep it going. There's still the Belfast Skeptics website and the Facebook page, so there's discussions go on there fairly frequently. But the last talk we had was last summer. But hopefully now we're going to try and get the talks a bit more regular. We're thinking every quarter, so 4 times a year. So next one hopefully will be around June time. So we'll try and get it publicised a bit more in advance for the next few. But thanks for coming along. Speaker tonight is Dr. Nick McCaffrey. So I'll leave it to him to explain what his talk's about tonight, and enjoy your evening. Thanks for coming. Hello.
Hi.
You're live.
So yes, hello, I'm Dr. Nick. Hey everybody. I'm going to be talking about the New Age and Native America. It's going to be based on research that I did about 10 years ago for my doctoral research at Queen's Anthropology Department, which rocks. So I'm going to be looking at the relationship between Native American religiosity and the appropriative aspect of New Age spirituality. Drawing upon my own anthropological research at Hopi, I'll present examples of the way in which indigenous culture has been idolized by contemporary spiritual seekers, and explore the reasons why the majority of Hopis, like many other contemporary Native American communities, are opposed to this appropriation and commodification of their culture. So that's the science bit. My relationship with Hopi dates back to when I was an undergraduate anthropology student at Queen's, and it was all very exciting. We got to go off and do real anthropology in the real world for 6 weeks during the summer. And I had read an article somewhere about the Hopi have clowns, and I come from a circus background, and I was quite interested in this vague idea of Native Americans having clowns, and I was a bit of a clown, so I thought, brilliant, I'll put together a research proposal, jump over across the other side of the world, and go and have some fun with these clowns. I arrived in Arizona, rang up the Hopi office and said, hey, I'm here to come and study your clowns. And they said, if you set foot on the reservation, we'll arrest you. What? And that was it, I wasn't allowed to go there. I just simply hadn't ticked any boxes. So fortunately, after the hangover had cleared, I found the local museum, the Museum in Northern Arizona, who sat me down very politely with the big book of Hopi with colouring in sections, and told me precisely why I, as an anthropologist, as somebody who had really done any research on the Hopi, who didn't understand anything about their culture, was kind of pissing them off by turning up and just assuming that I could come in and poke them with a big research stick. So I spent 6 weeks there kind of learning a little bit more about Hopi culture and precisely why they had said no. And it was quite interesting. They've been subject to quite a long history of people coming in and asking the wrong questions, and I was one of them on a long line of those sort of people. So I wrote a paper, it didn't really do much good. I wrote a little bit about clowns, read a bit, and kind of left it at that. A few years later I came back to do my PhD at Queen's, and I initially wanted to do it on tattooing and body piercing, but my supervisor just went, what about this Hopi stuff? It's quite interesting. No, they don't like me. And they said, well, wouldn't that be brilliant? Well, why don't they like you? Tell me about that. Why are they so opposed to research? Why are they so anti the idea of being probed. And so I did, and so I kind of focused some of my early research on looking at the representations of Hopiness in a global context, and the internet was brilliant for it. So I just discovered this whole world of New Age versions of Hopiness, and what the role of the Hopi was within a New Age context, whether it was in terms of healing. People would run Hopi spiritual healing workshops in all over the world, whether it was the relationship with whether it was Hopi ear candles and candling, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Whether it's the relationship the Hopis have with extraterrestrial visitors, and how there is a secret underground cavern underneath the Grand Canyon where the Hopis have been storing big spaceships. Any wacky story that you can believe, somehow someone within the New Age has connected it to Hopi. So it became the focus of my search of why these kinds of ideas and ideals exist, how that has an everyday and real impact on Hopi life itself. So my whole thesis incorporates ideas of identity, of concepts of authenticity, of appropriation, and it looked at the arts and crafts movement, it looked at tourism at Hopi, it looked at research ethics, key amongst anthropologists. But for this evening I wanted to focus on the real core of the research, which was the relationship between the Hopi and the New Age. And I wanted to present this in the context of skeptic talk, because I think, and I may make this up as I go along, I think I would actually be arguing for a religious idea. For one religious system over another, which is a little bit weird. What I'll be arguing against is probably fairly simple. I'm arguing against the appropriation of an idea of Hopiness within the New Age movement that is based on stereotype and misinformation, which is taken out of context and which has resulted in a certain amount of harm to a small indigenous population. So that's a fairly easy thing to say, what I'm against. What I'll be arguing for is perhaps more difficult. I will present the validity of a religious system developed within a specific context which has continuing value that cuts across a range of social and cultural spheres, and that is considered to be a vital element of individual and community identity within, and this is probably the key point, and only within this very small context. But a warning, I am an anthropologist by training, and as an anthropologist I'm not here to provide succinct and clear, concise answers. If you've ever wondered why you've never seen an anthropologist on the news explaining precisely and with clarity why a problem exists and how to solve it, that's because we don't know. The anthropologist in me isn't very good at finding the black and white solutions. I'm really quite interested in the weird grey mix in the middle. And anthropology is a bit like that. You know, we've investigated the whole gamut of human behaviour for about the last 150 years, from cities to rural communities to strange cults to normal people, and there's no black and white answers. It's wide, it's varied, and what we have learned is that there's probably more questions than there are answers, but they're really exciting questions. So with that in mind, I'm going to show you how the New Age and the Hopi have kind of collided over the last 60 odd years or so, and how these interactions cannot really be reduced to a simple the New Age is bad and the Hopi is good, but I'll guide you through some of the key aspects, I hope, and then let you make up your own minds, which I hope is the basis of a sceptical idea. There will be room for plenty of questions at the end, if that's all right. I might grab a glass of water there, if it's all right. So the Hopi are a Native American community who've lived in the northern Arizona desert since prehistory. Their own emergence myth supports the idea of a migration of groups, of clans, to what is considered now to be current Hopi land, and this is largely supported in the archaeological record. The Hopi themselves live in 12 separate villages clustered around 3 mesas, which are kind of big cliffs, big spits of land that rise above the northern Arizona desert. The federally defined Hopi reservation is surrounded entirely by the Navajo reservation, with whom the Hopi have a complex relationship. It's a subject for another time and place. Population figures back in 2000 placed the reservation population of Hopis at around 6,500, so it's quite a small community, although the enrolled members of the tribe was around 11,500. So only about 40% of self-identified Hopis do not actually live at Hopi. So Hopi identity is quite a complex mix of several elements, such as ethnicity, of clan, of village, of religious observance, of farming, of agriculture, of family. So Hopi may identify themselves according to various contexts. They may identify themselves as from a specific village, or as a general member of the Hopi tribe, as Native American, even as indigenous. And this, I suppose, this form of kind of Russian doll aspect of identification is vital. It reflects the complexity of contemporary Hopi identity, which is often overlooked in simplistic New Age representations of Hopiness. So not only is a Hopi considered to be born a Hopi or associated through blood, through soil, but also by doing Hopi, by speaking Hopi. All these various elements kind of intertwine at various points, at various places. Contemporary Hopi life is also a vibrant mix of history and modernity. Hopi life is not the same as it was several hundred years ago, much as our own lives are not the same as they were several hundred years ago. But there's a world of symbols and praxis that makes the Hopi world distinct from other rural American communities, and even distinct from other Native American communities in the United States. Being Hopi is different from being Navajo. Being Hopi is different from being Greek or from being Northern Irish. The Hopi language is still spoken, religious observances continue, traditional forms of agriculture are still practiced, and clan and social connections are maintained. And throughout all of these various networks, connections and reciprocal relationships runs a connection to a Hopi religious ideal that permeates almost every aspect of Hopi life. In short, Hopi religious ideals are intertwined with being Hopi in everyday practice. They're largely connected to reciprocal relationships between humans and ancestral spirits in order to improve chances of agriculture. It is, for all intents and purposes, quite practical, but quite complex and creative system of belief. Let me clarify. Okay. Hopi in the 21st century is different from the past, but connected to it. A Hopi individual may work from Monday to Friday as an attorney off the reservation, but they'll seek to fulfil their obligations at Hopi whenever and however they can. These obligations may be tied to their identity as a member of the tribe generally, or as a resident of one of the villages, as a member of a clan or a group of clans, or even as a member of a specific religious society. So these interconnected networks of social, biological and religious relationships with other Hopis is a vital survival system for thriving in a harsh environment. As you can imagine, being a farmer in a desert takes quite a lot of support, and having all those different networks of support just make for a slightly better chances of survival. What there also tends to be at Hopi is a very strict kind of compartmentalisation of knowledge. So not one Hopi will know all there is to be about Hopi. You, as a member of a specific village or as a specific clan, will know what you're entitled to know, so long as you have reached a certain age or a certain level of initiation within that system. There are little pockets and buttons and stuff all mixed together. So, for example, Hopi A, our attorney, who works from Monday to Friday, may have a certain standing in his village as an important member of a high-status clan. And it's a tiny bit like the caste system in India, where certain clans are deemed more important or have more kudos than certain other clans, and this is based on the migration stories that kind of mentioned earlier. Different groups came together, and whoever got there first at Hopi was kind of better, and whoever got there last wasn't quite as good. So there's this kind of weird status system going on there. So within his role as an attorney, he may have access to wealth and power, but in a joking relationship with his female in-laws, he will have little status and no power. In a religious sense, he may be at a stage of initiation that places him as lower than his neighbour, and therefore will have less access to certain levels of knowledge. He may be in a reciprocal relationship with another clan member, which places him in service to that clan member's family. So all these complex and interconnected systems are always in play, and it's exhausting trying to keep up with it. The flux of status as you move from conversation to conversation with Hopis, I found just staggering. But it did have one quite clear outcome, and that was this sense of humility. I never met a Hopi who bragged about their own lives, who bragged about their status. I never met a self-important Hopi who claimed to have all of the answers to everything, which was quite a relief to experience that type of personality living in contemporary America. Got a wicked sense of humour as well. I met my first... when I went back to do my doctoral research, I ended up staying at a museum on site for a few weeks until I found somewhere to live. And it was brilliant because I met this young German girl who decided to organise my entire doctoral research for me, which is brilliant. Thanks. So I think I arrived on the Wednesday or Thursday and I was jet lagged and a bit weirded out, and so I was kind of wandering around aimlessly. And on the Saturday at the museum there was an exhibition opening, and one of the guys I'd been told to go and see was this artist called Mike Caboti, who became a very, very good friend of mine. But he was a mural artist, and he had just finished an installation within the museum representing the ancient Kiva, which is a kind of underground dwelling. They have murals around the walls there, and he'd kind of translated a lot of the stuff that he'd seen when he was growing up and being initiated through the society with a lot of 20th century and 21st century iconography. So it was this beautiful mural that kind of spanned Hopi identity in the 21st century. It was lovely. And he was in the middle of this very busy room explaining to a group of priests from Zuni, which is a neighbouring Native American community, and there were about 4 or 5 quite important and influential guys, and he was in the middle of them, and this young, my German assistant, just grabbed me by the hand, pulled me through the middle of these priests, and went, "This man is Nick, he is an anthropologist, he will speak to you right now." And I just kind of stood there, "Hello, Mr. Newton." Just stood there going, a bit good with the, right, now I'm Nick, and anthropologist Hopi, and I think maybe out for a coffee or something would be nice. And he just looked down and just went, "Man, you're going to have to learn to speak Hopi or English, because I don't know what the fuck you're on about." I think we're going to be alright. Yeah. So that's Hopi. So my aim for that section was to introduce the idea that Hopi identity is complex and ever-changing flux of confusing and often conflicting social, cultural, historic and religious forces that serve to unite every Hopi individual into a series of reciprocal relationships with a variety of their neighbours, and which ultimately results in a series of networks that any individual Hopi can rely upon to help them if they get into trouble. Or, in short, to make you as confused as I was when I first arrived at Hopi, and that sense of confusion maintained itself throughout my entire fieldwork experience. I've got the option here of doing exactly the same thing by attempting to find the New Age as well, if you want. A chaotic, fluctuating smorgasbord of spirituality and religious observance that's both a result of and reaction to modernity, that both rejects and rejoices in ideas of community, whilst endlessly promoting the importance of the self and the individual spiritual sensation. But I'm not going to. I'm too tired. So I'm going to simplify as much as I can. Let me say there is a nice circle there. That's the New Age. It's weird and it's complex and it's complicated and there's lots of stuff happening in it. And over here, there's this circle of Hopi. And in this beautiful Venn diagram, here's the little sphere of interaction that I was looking at. What elements of Hopiness and New Age collided and how it did. What I will say is that the New Age does incorporate ideas from indigenous and contemporary societies around the world, but whether it's Tai Chi, whether it's Buddhism, Australian Aboriginal society, shamanism, paganism, spiritualism, Reiki, earth religions, I went mental writing all this stuff, Christianity, mysticism, Norse, Celtic mythologies, so on and so on and so on. So within this complex milieu, the spiritual shopper is free to pick and choose elements of whatsoever suits them. It is on one hand a hyper-cultural, cosmopolitan pick and mix religious system, but on the other hand, importantly, it's become a cultural norm, an accepted way. Individuals are encouraged and expected to glean what they can from existing spiritual and religious systems. So when a system that is rooted in compartmentalised, controlled access to relevant religious observations collides with a system that promotes a free-for-all approach to spirituality, there are bound to be tensions. So the role of the Native American generally within New Age networks is widespread. And once more, I don't have a great deal of time to explore it here, but let us say for convenience that it's based upon a certain stereotype that the Indian is perhaps closer to nature, timeless, a noble savage, somehow more spiritual than religious, and of course doomed to become extinct if it were not for the good deeds of the New Age proponent of mystic Indians. And of course, didn't you know that my great-grandmother was actually Cherokee, and so technically I'm Indian too, so let's go purify ourselves by burning sage and performing a sweat lodge ceremony to speak with the ancestors. Apologies for being crass. I've written Hopi ear candles. Anybody heard of Hopi ear candles?
Yes.
Anybody ever actually used them?
Yes.
No. Did they work? Did you like them?
I used them somewhere, they said it worked.
Yeah. Right. That's, for people that aren't completely familiar, a Hopi ear candle is a big candle that you stick in your ear, you light the top, and there's a current of warm air that comes out and softens the wax, and at some point it's generally said to come out more easily. People have said that it helps with tinnitus, it helps with earache, it's a generally soothing experience. Right? There are certain medical arguments against it. Don't want to get into that here. What I do want to get into is sticking a candle in your ear. That's going to be a medical. What I'm going to talk about is the use of the term Hopi ear candles and how. Taking it as this was an invention by a German company called Biosun in the mid-80s to the early 90s. They invented this association with the Hopi. The Hopi have nothing to do with it. When I was doing my research, I actually had to ring Dave or email Dave and say, can you nip up the Ulmer Road, or the Lisbon Road, pop into the health food shop, buy us a set of Hopi ear candles and post them to me at Hopi because they wouldn't mind seeing what they are.
I said to the guy in the shop as well, I said, apparently they've never heard of these.
Yeah. It's brilliant. So, there's a picture in the packaging of the Hopi ear candles. There's a picture of a guy called Martin Gasvesioma, who is a very interesting political character in Hopi, and I'll kind of mention him a little bit later. But there's also a picture of a mural showing somebody passing over, allegedly, a packet of Hopi ear candles to another Hopi, and they're all, very, very Indians. That's actually a mural on a wall at a building built in the 1930s at Grand Canyon, and the mural is designed by the father of the guy I was talking about, the mural artist, Mike Cabody. His dad, Fred Cabody, painted it. And so I asked Mike about it, and I said, "What is this Hopi ear candles?" And he's going, "Yeah, so you can hear the spirits." Like, this is bullshitting bastard. They're not, they're feathers. Another Indian thing. So why am I mentioning that? What is the issue there with the Hopi ear candles? The Hopis are opposed to it. They don't like being used to promote. And it's not so much about the fact that this company is making money. If they were just to say ear candles, crack on with it. You decide whether they work or not. But it's this idea that you give it this sense of authenticity. It's a Native American product. It's the Hopi. The Hopi are spiritual, peaceful, loving people. If you use their ear candles, your ears will be more peaceful and loving. I don't know. Maybe you will be able to hear the aliens underneath the Grand Canyon. So, the most common element of Hopiness that permeates within the New Age is a body of knowledge known as Hopi prophecy. Now, has anybody come across Hopi prophecies at all? Right. I'll give a very, very brief synopsis of this topic. So following the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the end of World War II, a group of Hopi men met to discuss the relevance of these incidents to a series of prophecies within Hopi discourse that included a gourd of ashes, a gourd like butternut squash, something like that, empty gourd, right, full of ashes, being dropped from the sky by a specific Hopi deity, and this gourd exploded, burned the ground, oiled the oceans, and generally caused destruction and mayhem. It said that the appearance of this weapon would signal the start of the end, and would be accompanied by several other signs, including such things as the appearance of roads in the sky, which some people have said to be the more aeroplanes, and the return of the pahana, which is the long-lost white brother. So the meetings discussing these prophecies continued in secret at Hopi over the next 3 or 4 years after the end of World War II, until eventually a couple of spokespersons were assigned to spread the word of these Hopi prophecies to a non-Hopi audience. What should be pointed out here is the context of the time. Most of the Hopis disseminating these prophecies were not necessarily recognised as religious leaders in any way in a Hopi context, but all of the men involved in this, and 2 or 3 women became involved later on, were vehemently opposed to the idea of an organised, unified Hopi tribe, which was currently being drawn together by the United States government. So, up until that point, when I mentioned the 12 villages on these 3 mesas, each village was quite independent, its own little political entity, and there were certain networks, whether it was clan or family or religious groups, kind of crossed over these villages, so these villages were connected, but it was quite a kind of anarchic system of everybody was keeping everybody else in check. What the federal government decided when they came in and kind of trying to communicate more to the Hopi was they kept turning up and nobody knew who was in charge. They needed a Hopi government. They needed the tribe to form in order for them to start communicating more effectively with them. And so these guys who met to discuss the prophecy were opposed to this idea of a federally designed Hopi tribe, or federally defined Hopi tribe. So here was a group of men and later women looking for external help to challenge the authority of the government, and they were using a version of Hopi knowledge to back up their case. But who was going to listen to a body of knowledge that promoted spiritual reflection, a doomsday end-of-world scenario, a counter-cultural style opposition to federal governments, and a call for a simpler, more peaceful return to a more natural and harmonious lifestyle? Throw in a concept that mentions a long-lost white saviour, and you have all the ingredients for a sudden influx of hippies, New Agers, and other disenfranchised Westerners lining up ready to save the Hopis from themselves. Disaster. I've actually written that and put an exclamation mark. Disaster. It was probably the Hopis who first sought the attention of the hippies. And it kind of leads us to the first rule of Hopi, which is whenever you find 2 Hopi men agreeing with each other for more than 5 minutes, one of them is lying. When I was at Hopi 10 years ago, I was allowed back, by the way, yeah, I'll mention that. When I went back and said, look, kind of balls like last time, I'm really sorry, but what I am interested in, I don't want to uncover any of this kind of secret world of knowledge. What I'm interested in, this little Venn diagram, this sphere of interaction between the New Age and the Hopi. And I went, yeah, I'm quite interested in that as well. Crack on. So when I was there, I was given this file of correspondence, which they referred to as the wacky pahana file. The term pahana is kind of multi-layered. Most Hopis use it as a generic term for white people. But the word does come from this mythological white-skinned brother who parted company with his red-skinned brothers of the Hopi at this mythological emergence, but was foretold to return and bring peace and love to all of humanity at some later stage. And I met several long-lost white brothers during my time at Hopi, although none of them turned out to be genuine. I'm going to if I can find it, read a little bit about meeting one of these guys. So this is, there was a dance at Hopi. Each village has a kind of village plaza, and a lot of the religious dances were quite public, so they'd be held in the middle of this plaza. People would stand on the houses and the rooftops and watch what's happening, and then a lot of it would go back to these underground dwellings, and there'd be the kind of the private bit, it's the public bit, private bit. And the village that I was staying in was really nice. It's a village called Hopis, and was quite willing and open to let anybody come and watch these dances. There was a point at which interference at the dances got so bad in some villages that they just closed them to any non-Hopi at all, which was kind of against the idea of doing the dances in the first place. You know, dances were for everyone, for the benefit of all people, so closing them off to non-Hopis was considered a bit strange. But anyway, so I was at one of these dances at Hopis, the village that I was living in, and there was a break in the dance. They'd been dancing all morning, have a little break. I would kind of go for a little wander around the village to see what's happening. And as I'm resting against the back of my car, kicking stones and blowing smoke, a middle-aged, slightly rugged but gentle-looking man approaches me. And he turns, "So, what brings you to the centre of the universe on this summer solstice?" he asks. I mumble something non-committal about being an anthropology student, visiting friends, checking out the dances, before giving up completely and asking, "And what about yourself?" And after an initial equally non-committal response revolving around the topic of bringing food and blankets for the elders, my fellow scruffy Anglo can obviously not restrain the true enthusiasm he holds for having made his way to Hopevilla at long last. Over the next 10 or 15 minutes, it transpires that my friend is not simply another visiting pahana, but is in fact the pahana. The long-lost white brother had finally returned home. The pahana had come to realise his identity through his work with light energies, crystal healing, and a recent interest in the published works of a guy called Thomas Males. And he's written a lot about Hopi prophecy, and you can ask me about him later. Apparently alongside a string of previous life incarnations, which included Atlantean, Lemurian and Arthurian identities, my friend's attraction towards all things Indian and all Indian people could be easily explained by the fact that he was indeed the current incarnation of the white-skinned saviour of Hopi mytho-history. The pahana led the conversation. He explained that he travelled from his current home in Flagstaff to Hopevilla, where he planned to meet with the elders of the Bear clan in the village, present himself as the pahana, and readily accept and pass any of the challenges that the Bear clan elders may have waiting for him. At one stage, a passerby looked curiously at the pair of us. Still a little bit strange to find two white people having such a discussion in the middle of the village. And this young Hopi woman walked past, and the pahana turns around and calls her, "When will the women finish doing ceremony?" And the woman just kind of looked at us perplexed, and she says, "If you mean when is lunch over, it'll be when they finish eating." Sharing my experience with the pahana with friends over the next few days gave me the opportunity to collect a number of further tales and opinions regarding this type of visitor to Hopi. These opinions generally ranged from mild concern to a number of comical stories. Apparently my pahana had been pointed out to the police, the Hopi Rangers on duty, who had already successfully prevented the man from parking his car on top of a kiva. The word had already spread to a guy called Lee Koanwisiuma, he kind of was in charge of my research at Hopi. He'd arrived home from a day working in his fields to find a note pinned to his door that yet another crazy white guy was asking around stupid questions. But essentially, though the visit was treated with a certain sense of humour, did he speak Hopi? Was an often asked question upon hearing of my meeting with this character from a mythical past. No, he didn't, I replied. Well, I guess he wasn't our pahana then. You say he was looking for the Bear clan at Hopevilla? Yes, he was looking for the Bear clan at Hopevilla. Did you tell him? Did I tell him what? There is no Bear clan at Hopevilla. There's never been a Bear clan at Hopevilla. I don't know. If he wanted to meet the Bear clan, why didn't he bring him to see my wife? So there was all these... She was actually Bear Clan, she wasn't just Grumpy. So there was a string of very humorous ways of dealing with this guy. It was just another example of just another crazy white guy turning up. So the wacky pahana file is interesting as it shows the range of attitudes that those within the New Age have. Hopiness has a certain kudos within the New Age circle, whether it's ear candles, whether it's art, whether it's prophecy, a connection to extraterrestrial civilizations. And to a large extent, those within the New Age who draw upon those ideas or stories do so in their own time and in their own place, and therefore don't have a real impact or effect on Hopis themselves. But increasingly, the world of the New Age does have a direct impact on Hopi society. And it's here that the oversimplified stereotype of indigenous culture has a direct impact on the health and well-being of a community. And again, another little brief one. If I'm going on for too long, just throw stuff at me. I'm going to tell another little story, and then I'm going to try and wrap up, and we'll open up to questions if that's all right with you. Okay. The second story I'm going to say includes a couple of quotes from a newspaper. This happened in between September 28, 2000, year 2000. So this is a quote from file here. This is a quote from the Bureau of Indian Affairs police report. He stated he was angry and was not going to be sacrificed. He stated he was a magnet to troubled people. God had put him on earth to help bad people, and he was a tuheka, which is a medicine man. On the September 28, 2000, X was transported to the Kokanini County Jail facility by the Hopi BIA police. Prior to departing, X made a statement that this was a setup and the Hopi tribe is fucked and he rules Hopi land. Lying next to this report within the folders of the Wacky Pahana file sits almost 50 pages of handwritten ledger paper authored by the individual described above. He refers to himself in the text as Sun Bear or Jay. The pages are held together with string, and on the cover sheet reads the title Tayopana by Pahana. Written in a form of prose that I most closely associated with the form of gangster rap, Pahana, or Sun Bear or Jay, elaborates upon his status as saviour of the Hopi people in a graphic, offensive and often disturbing manner. Scattered throughout the writing are a handful of Hopi words and phrases that show at least some evidence of familiarity with Hopi culture, particularly the concept of witchcraft, as well as a number of other esoteric terms, mingled with a sense of generic Indian-style references, drug use references and fiction. Following is a quote from him. I'm not going to try and sing this. You see, I'm an invincible kachina, so there's no need for a physical weapon. All I need is my mind and a pinch of dark magic to teach this white man a lesson. I puff on some herb and wrap special beads on tight. I've got a little sacred something that turns the dark south night bright as daylight. Herb, shrooms and peyote can help this sick world, says this badass healer. Accompanying the book is a covering note with implicit instructions on how to recognise the author when he arrives at Hopi, what preparations should be made for his arrival, and how, after an eventful and violent young life, he came to realise through the mystic airwaves that he was the Pahana. In this letter, the author asks the Hopi, please don't forget the one you were promised who is always true. I am that way to Hopi because you earned me and I love you. The author also makes claims that he, like all good Hopis, is a good farmer. However, his field of expertise has been limited to the growing of marijuana. Though the methods employed to safeguard his crop should, he argues, be adopted by all Hopi farmers. If someone hurts you or oppresses you or takes away your rights over and over again, and you give them countless warnings, this is a quote from him, and they won't respect you, kill them. You kill those people, cut their head off, put the skull on a stick or a post so that bad people know what happens to them. Eventually, the author explains he holds the missing Fire Clan tablets, and this is again another part of the prophecy, and the Hopi should make some arrangement to come and collect them from him. If that's impossible, he'll make another set as he is the best artist in the world. It's difficult to begin to explain how offensive these writings could be to any number of Hopi people. However, it's clear to see why the recipient of these writings, who was actually the guy who was putting me up in the village of Hopis, was concerned by this gift to the Hopi people. And unfortunate to know that his concerns were not unfounded. The author of these writings did arrive at Hopi soon after the writings were received, and after a very brief conversation with a pair of Hopi artists who were working outside of a home in the village of Araibi, the man in question became agitated at the attitude of the two artists, who it seemed did not share the belief that he was in fact a medicine man or a witch or the pahana. The man returned to his car, pulled out a shotgun and let off 2 rounds of live ammunition in the direction of the 2 Hopis. Missed them. He returned to his car and attempted to drive away from Hopi, where he was followed and eventually arrested by the police. So, yeah, that's a very extreme example, but this is an example. It illustrates the potential harm that an incorrect infatuation with an indigenous society can have. If it were not for the appropriation of Hopiness by key New Agers in the decades leading up to the early 21st century, then this kind of visitor would not exist. Hopis are a very humble people, and I learned a lot about my own attitude towards New Agers from them. It was tempered by a genuine empathy that most Hopis had for those seen on a spiritual path, an empathy which I found quite overwhelming. Indeed, I attempted to get in touch with a woman who ran New Age tours to Hopi, and I emailed her with some questions that I had, and she emailed me back quite bluntly saying, look, I think you've got a really negative attitude and some existing ideas about what the New Age is, and I don't feel comfortable talking to you about it. Which is weird, because I'd gone to Hopi thinking that I'd be able to speak to all the New Agers, and the Hopis would tell me to fuck off, and the first person who tells me, New Agers. And it was true, I had a certain idea, you know, I'd read a lot of this stuff on the internet, I thought these was a bunch of whacked out crazy ass people. But the Hopis kind of taught me to look at them in a completely different way. I would often be told that anyone was welcome to come to Hopi and pray in whatever way they choose, so long as it doesn't disrupt the work that was already going on there. For example, disrupting public ceremonies, which has happened. Stealing prayer feathers and other artefacts from shrines and sacred places. Yes, it's happened. Walking into people's homes, demanding to speak with the aliens, seeking help from the Hopi. Yes, it's happened. Almost every crazed, whacked out New Age idea that you can think of has been connected in some way to Hopis, and yet they still treat countless visitors with a calm, quiet, yet firm respect and tolerance. So the key message really is that, not to press that button until you finish talking, the key message really is that New Agers treat Hopi culture as another source for their own syncretised worldview. They're taking information that's specific to a very clear cultural context and attempting to cram it into a global, non-specific milieu. I can't truly say that Hopis do not have assailants or meaning outside of Hopi, but if they do, then in my opinion, it should be done with respect and by the Hopi themselves. The problem with the New Age version of Hopiness is that it does nothing to support contemporary Hopi issues. It relegates Hopis to a mystical stereotype of global indigenousness, without accepting the complexity of Hopi life. Hopis, just like many small communities, are attempting to navigate their own path through the emerging 21st century, looking to the future whilst recognising the past. It serves no worth for them to be, at best, held on some spiritual pedestal by someone who's looking to add another notch to their healing therapy repertoire, and at worst, treated as inauthentic, globalised traitors to tradition by those members of contemporary society who wish for all indigenous people to get back to wearing sackcloth and living off the land. And so I suppose it's fitting that we return to the Hopi clowns, which is what started my particular journey to Hopi. And this was the way it was explained to me by my friend Mike Kaboti, the artist, who turned around and said, the New Agers, the hippies, when they turn up at the village, they're like the clowns that we have at the dances. They see everything, they're excited by it. And when the clowns perform alongside the dancers at Hopi, this is precisely what they do. They run around, they try and grab the dancers, they try and grab everything. They think it's amazing, they're overwhelmed by it. And at that point, they're kind of tolerated. They're going to go, yeah, well, this shit is pretty good. We like it too. But then the clowns start grabbing them and collecting them and start getting into a competition as to who's got the most, and they're putting them out into their own little benches. They're fighting amongst each other. And so this was Mike saying the Hopi, the New Agers are like the clowns. They just go that one step too far, and they just cross the line, and it just doesn't serve or help anything. What he didn't really mention or elaborate upon was that the Hopis also have in these dances great big ogres and men with big sticks, and the clowns are pretty much organised and sorted out quite publicly, and people tend not to be like the clowns anymore. But I just don't think there's a stick big enough for the New Agers. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you very much.